A low hum of anticipation filled the courtroom in Tennessee as the 9-day hearing neared its climax. A federal magistrate judge had listened to every witness, every argument, and now the anticipation lay heavily in the air. Ultimately, her decision would determine whether Kilmer Armando Abrego Garcia, who goes by Kilmer Abrego, would remain detained or be released on bond. But beneath that, the hearing would expose cracks in the government's case and reveal the complexity of a system balancing criminal justice and immigration law. Welcome to Celebrity Cookies, where the tea is always hot and the stories come with sprinkles of surprise. Make sure to subscribe, leave a comment with your take on the story. The story begins with Abrego's return to the United States. Born in Maryland and married to a U.S. citizen, Abrego was mysteriously deported to El Salvador despite a clear order preventing such removal. He alleges he was ripped from American soil without due process. After legal intervention, Abrego was flown back into U.S. custody, not taken home, but to Tennessee to face federal charges alleging human smuggling and perhaps trafficker-level criminal violation. Immigration and criminal charges now collided, and the judge had to determine how to handle pretrial detention under the Bail Reform Act. That statutory act presumes innocence until proven guilty. A defendant cannot be held pretrial unless they meet one of 3 criteria. They pose a flight risk, present a danger to the community, or face charges involving a minor or sexual exploitation. The government had broad latitude to argue all 3. Among the allegations, Abrego smuggled 9 people across state lines. One was a minor. Cooperating witnesses claimed he planned to exploit people or affiliated with MS-13. Their evidence came via testimonies and Texas law enforcement affidavits. But the judge found that much of it lacked corroboration and risked being unreliable double hearsay. In her memorandum, Judge Holmes distinguished human smuggling from trafficking. Smuggling involves voluntary assistance across borders. Trafficking requires coercion, deception, or exploitation. Abrego's indictment charged him with transporting people, some allegedly minors, but offered little evidence of traffic-level exploitation. The judge noted that smuggling by itself didn't automatically justify pretrial detention, especially when statutory differences implied lesser punishment. In federal sentencing guidelines, human smuggling typically carries far shorter sentences, under 2 years, compared to trafficking, which can involve decades. Unlike drug dealers or violent offenders, Abrego didn't appear likely to flee. The minor allegation hinged on a hastily completed traffic stop roster listing one associate's birth date. No direct testimony from the alleged minor. No corroborating evidence. A handwritten note is not a hearing. The judge said the government produced no actual witness to verify minor involvement or trafficking intent. Much of the testimony came from cooperating witnesses. Individuals facing charges themselves offered leniency in exchange for testimony. One male cooperator had been deported 5 times. Another was an admitted smuggling leader. A female cooperator was related to the first 2. All testified under grant deals, which could motivate false or exaggerated claims. Judge Holmes found their narrative unreliable. Internal inconsistencies, hearsay filtering through an agent's testimony, it wasn't enough to outweigh the presumption of innocence. Even the MS-13 claim fell flat. 2 unnamed witnesses provided double hearsay accounts of gangster affiliation, contradicted by each other. No documentation, no clear tattoo evidence, no surveillance photos. Just rumors filtered through unreliable sources. Nothing in the record tied Abrego to any gang. The government argued obstruction risk. Cooperating witnesses said he could intimidate or retaliate, but again, no evidence. No threats, no interference. Nothing beyond speculation. Bail conditions such as GPS monitoring, travel restriction, and third-party custodians would suffice to mitigate rumors. There appeared no credible basis to detain him pending trial. Immigration compounded everything but did not factor into Bail Reform Act analysis. The judge called the proceedings an academic exercise on pretrial release. Even if released, Abrego would remain in IC custody under separate statutes governing non-citizens. He wouldn't walk free. That's what the judge predicted. But bail law wasn't about reality, it was about principle. Could the criminal court detain him for smuggling without evidence he fit into categories that justify pretrial detention? The answer, no. The hearing capped with a release order. Conditions would include limited travel, GPS bracelet, regular check-ins. Bail set high enough to provide incentive but not ruin his family. But the ruling cements Abrego's path forward. He isn't a threat, he isn't a flight risk, and the government lacks enough evidence, not yet, to hold him pretrial. His trial will proceed, yet matters remain unstable. The government, led by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Tennessee, filed a motion to stay the release order pending appeal to District Judge Krenzler. They argued that the magistrate's errors required review, and that Abrego should remain detained through appeal. The clock ticks. The hearing on may require a quick back and forth. Parallel to the criminal case, Abrego faces new removal proceedings via a non-detainable deportation jurisdiction, perhaps to Guatemala or Mexico. The Supreme Court ordered his return, and a Maryland judge imposed contempt sanctions on U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement for the earlier illegal deportation. Now Maryland, Tennessee, and D.C. area courts are intertwined across jurisdictions, and no one knows how the district court and immigration court rulings will align. But for now, Judge Holmes has gutted the government's detention arguments. A serious legal rebuke. It's rare for a federal judge to find cooperating witnesses wholly insufficient that way. She said the case appeared rushed, the charges mismatched, and evidence speculative at best. A bold move. Once District Judge Krenzler rules on the stay, Abrego will either remain in custody or live under judicial house arrest. It's unlikely, but if released, he'd still face criminal trial, immigration process, and public pressure. Either way, the next chapter is a high-stakes legal showdown. In court filings, Abrego's team questioned motives. Why charge him in Tennessee? Why deport illegally? Why conflate smuggling and trafficking? They whispered of possible racial profiling or deeper motives, immigration deterrence via criminal prosecution and removal. The government's next tactic could involve motions in limine to preemptively shape admissible evidence. Or they could apply for full detention citing national security or flight risk, claiming that Abrego has deep ties in gang-controlled communities, plus real means via family in Maryland and El Salvador. The pretrial stage will evolve into a chess game of evidence and disclosure. For advocates, the case illustrates how smuggling prosecutions can weaponize bail law against immigrants, holding them beyond pretrial for technical or administrative reasons. Immigration law does not provide bail, but criminal courts do. That overlap will echo in law schools, criminal justice clinics, and immigrant legal support campaigns. Abrego's defense team is already preparing expert testimony, immigration attorneys, forensic document analysts to assess the traffic stop roster, and psychologists to testify on detainee risk post-release. As we all look ahead, one thing is clear. The judge's memorandum is more than a bail order, it's a message. Even in thorny immigration crossovers, criminal defendants deserve consistent legal standards. Evidence must satisfy statutory categories, not prosecutorial guesswork. When Abrego goes to trial, the government will have to prove smuggling beyond reasonable doubt. Maybe they'll blame each individual for hiring him as driver. But will they tie him to trafficking, exploitation, or charge him with minor endangering kidnapping? If not, the case may hinge on cooperation deals gone sour. Defense attorneys are lining up motions to exclude testimony from any suspect witnesses whose value depends on leniency. In the meantime, the immigration court will fight for removable grounds based on smuggling and the minor allegation. Abrego will argue humanitarian defense. His spouse is U.S. citizen. He faces family disruption, hardship, and moral injury due to deportation. Imagine the irony. The government argued he's a threat, but immigration judges might afford him relief under cancellation of removal or adjustment of status. Beyond the legal maneuvers, the case holds cultural weight. Deportation in the Trump era became policy. Now its legal contours are being tested. If someone with his circumstances can be removed wrongfully and then detained felony level in Tennessee for smuggling, who is safe? The lines between criminal conduct and immigration status must be clear. Conflating them violates law and erodes civil rights. Judge Holmes' decision reminds Americans that the founding principle of habeas corpus still holds. Bail must be justified by evidence, not politics or fear. Letting courts override detention by affirming due process would make legal history. We'll be watching District Judge Krenzler's ruling on the stay next week. Ultimately, Abrego's case may even reach the Sixth Circuit, climate for bringing new limits to criminal detention in immigration smuggling prosecutions. But right now, a magistrate judge did what she's meant to do, stand between the reins of government and an individual's liberty. That moment alone deserves respect, and signals that the wheels of justice still turn, even when travel and deportation orders threaten to blind them. Abrego hasn't won the war, still facing charges and detainment at ICE, but he's won the first battle, a victory for presumption of innocence, due process, and fairness under the law. The courtroom may have been temporarily bloodied by a hard-hitting ruling, but that's how checks and balances work. And on this stage, liberty prevailed one step at a time. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this situation, so please share your opinions in the comments. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated on the story.